Shall we resume? An apple now. Okay, so I'm just looking at the schedule. So then we've got Cicely. Cicely Marshall's going to take the chair. Cicely's an independent research fellow at King's, but she's also a member of the David Attenborough Building. Works on conservation in Africa and plant biodiversity in Africa. So thank you ever so much for chairing the next session, Cicely.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you, David. I'm pleased to welcome 4 of our previous UCCRI students who are going to share with us some of the inspiring things that they've been getting up to since they graduated. Each of our speakers will speak for 5 minutes, followed by a couple of minutes for questions. Do please post your questions in the chat function. If you just write question, then I will invite you to ask your question directly to the speaker. If you write your question out in full, then I'll ask it on your behalf. Up to you, depending on your internet connection and so on. So let me hand over to our first speaker, Dr. Ayurveda Zavala, Senior Editor with the journal Nature Sustainability and affiliated lecturer with Land Economy, working in the area of environmental governance. Over to you, Ayurveda. I hope she's here.
Hello, can you hear me and see me?
Yes. We hear you.
Brilliant, yeah. Good afternoon, Ayurveda Zavala here from Cambridge as well. It's a joy to see so many familiar faces and names here. I find it hard to do a single thing, and in the past I did very different ones simultaneously, such as web development while studying environmental sciences. Today is no different, and while I still teach a bit at the university and do research on environmental policy implementation, I'm working full-time as an editor at Nature, the scientific journal, and this is my focus in the next 5 minutes. I finished the PhD in 2015, and then I stayed. Let me share one thing. Here we go. Yeah, I finished the PhD, and then I stayed 2 more years at UCCRI and Land Economy as a teaching associate and researcher. Then I took a bit of a risky move to join the editorial team to launch Snatch Sustainability, where I have been since. The way in between involved several applications for grants and lectureships, some of which were successful, but while walking at my favorite beach and after consulting with many trusted senior colleagues, I felt this was a very exciting project to join. In most journals, the fully staffed and paid editorial roles are more administrative. They handle communication and so on. The editors who make decisions on manuscripts are full-time academics who do so on a voluntary basis, in addition to their main responsibilities. However, at Nature, this is the other way around, and we do this on a full-time basis. The core task is to read manuscripts, assess them, and decide whether to send them out for peer review. And as you can imagine, the range of topics we read is huge, from urban pollution in China to the role of spirituality in conservation. We then find reviewers, and once they've written a report, we assess the pros and cons and decide whether to go ahead with revising or accepting the paper. The criteria for editorial decision-making are many. We go through training to learn this and be agile to make many decisions daily, but we can leave that topic for another conversation or for your questions. In addition, we also edit the papers to make them more understandable, and I personally tend to give a lot of feedback to improve the figures. Sometimes we rewrite the abstract completely and suggest quite different titles. The papers work better as a result, and you help more effective communication of papers that are going to be widely read. We also participate in the diffusion of papers, for example, on Twitter. We write editorials such as the one I'm sharing now on the chat. Here we go. we also commission opinion pieces like the other link I just shared. However, know that none of these works has your name on it, so no one knows how you have helped improve the paper. In some cases, we don't have much input because the papers are very good from the beginning, whereas we really reshape others. We also attend conferences, visit departments and universities to meet interesting scholars and to learn what they are working on. And this is all happening now online, as you can imagine. At Nature, there is also an online community where we or anyone working on sustainability can write the stories behind the paper or share ideas. And this is a bit of ads. If you're an early career researcher with a PhD, this sounds like interesting, there are some job openings now at Nature Climate Change and Nature Communications. Now, I could give some advice for early career researchers on publishing, perhaps. These are like just 3 points. Speak to the editors and ask if you're in doubt of any practical matters. When you receive review reports, don't take them personally. Just take the feedback that can be turned into improvements to your work and move on. And ask for feedback before submitting, and ask again to your peers, supervisors. You can follow examples of papers published at the journal and so on. At all times, try to keep an eye on the big picture. Why are you doing this research? How can it help make the world a bit better? Is it specific enough to inform practice, or is it so generic that no one can disagree with your claims and it's also unclear how to implement them? More generally on career choice, I would suggest to be open to a range of options. You can work wherever you feel you can have an impact, and this doesn't need to be academia. And you can think of Attenborough, whose main role is in communication and awareness raising. Be proactive to keep a good life-working balance. Everyone tells you nowadays these kind of things. Just do what keeps you in focus and what makes you feel satisfied afterwards. Sometimes the best move in your career, as in my case, can come from actions you've taken at the side of your main work. For example, before Nature, I started to publish the working papers of Synergy and edited school magazines much earlier. You also need time off work to know what that satisfies you, and that's why I showed the photo of the beach earlier. You need clarity of mind to make good decisions, like the many we do every day. That's it for me. What would you like to ask?
Oh, thank you, Aura. That was great. First question. What's been your favorite manuscript to work on with the journal this year?
Wow, that's a big question. So there is one, well, the one that I just shared, which is a perspective published this week. That's something for which I discussed the idea from the very beginning. I thought of the huge behavioral change that we were all undergoing after the pandemic. And then I thought, okay, what can we learn from this for sustainability? We're trying to change people's behavior and suddenly we've done it overnight. So what can we learn? And then I decided who would be a good person to write on that. We had a Skype conversation and then we moved from there.
Yeah, very interesting. You must have found that, some good tips for us as submitters of manuscripts, rather than reviewers. You must have found sitting on the other side has, helped a lot in your own writing.
Absolutely, yeah. And seeing the publication process from the other side it makes a huge difference. You see how there is no standard behavior for how the flow goes, how people write cover letters, how people behave, and so on. And everyone is very different. Some people are very polite, very professional. Others are a bit kind of more angry at you, and so on. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Thank you very much, Aura. Let's move on to Dr. Matheus Nunes, postdoctoral researcher at the University of Helsinki. Matheus uses remote sensing methods to monitor vegetation changes. Over to you, Matheus.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Yep.
It's very good to be back to David Attenborough building and see lots of familiar faces. I left Cambridge about 20 months ago, and since then I never came back because I've been, for about 1 year, I was just in the field, in the middle of different forests. I'm gonna show you a little bit about it. And since the pandemic started, I came back to Helsinki, where I am now in Finland. I did my PhD with David Coombs using spectroscopy and airborne LiDAR to map tropical forests, especially in Malaysia. And since then, I moved on, and now I'm working mostly on terrestrial LiDAR. And I just literally went to different parts of the world with this terrestrial LiDAR with me, and I was just scanning lots of forests. I'm gonna share my screen. Is it on the presentation mode, right? Yes. So this is a picture, for example, that was from the LBA tower, K34. It's a place where lots of measurements has been done to understand tropical forests and how they contribute to the carbon cycle. And this is one of the forests that I was working at in the Amazon last year. And I've been involved in a range of different projects around the tropics, especially Malaysia, the Amazon, and Kenya. And some of the projects I've been very excited about. One of these one here, how big herbivores, for example, elephants and giraffes, they can interact. Or they can not affect, but yeah, like how they contribute to changing the carbon dynamics in these savannas, and how, for example, they change the tree architecture because, well, obviously they feed on the leaves and everything. And another project that I'm going to talk a little bit more about it is this phenology of Amazonian forests. And I really want to understand how these forests in the Amazon, they are changing. So basically, I've been working in the between April last year and March this year in the BDFF project, which is the Biological Dynamics of Forest Fragments project, where I spent 7 months last year. I worked also in Kenya, Mount Kenya and Taita Hills, to understand like how land use change is affecting the microclimate and also affecting the forests, how degradation can affect these forests. And also at the SAFE project in Malaysia, Borneo more specifically, to understand how logging has been affecting the canopy and the microclimate of these forests. And in this biological dynamics of forest fragments project, it's one of the oldest, longest running projects in the tropics to understand how fragmentation has been affecting the canopy of forests. It's a project that was created in 1979, and it's a controlled experiment to understand how fragmentation will contribute to changing the canopy and like the fauna, the flora of these fragments. It was a very fun project to work with. I spent 6-7 months in literally just sleeping in a hammock. So I know it's been like a great year for lots of us in big cities and everything, but I was pretty much isolated in the Amazon for 7 months, living in this place, in this kind of tent, sleeping on a hammock last year. And my main goal there was to understand how these fragments, they have been, I was monitoring these fragments using a terrestrial laser scanner over time. I was there for 6-7 months, and I was scanning repeatedly the same places for every 2 weeks. And for example, this is one of the first, our first times we use the remote, the spectral, the terrestrial lidar. This is what type of image we can get from them. You can have like a very detailed, detailed perspective of the canopy, of the understory, very fine details. And one of them is how, for example, the trees, they're shedding their leaves or they are flushing their leaves with season. So I was there from the very wet season in the Amazon to the very dry season in the Amazon, in the same places, monitoring how these trees, they were changing over time with climate. Yeah, so now I'm ready to process most of this data and analyze and work on these different projects. And yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you, Matheus. If you have questions, please do write them in the chat or to me privately. Do you have any early results from your data collection in the Amazon?
Results?
Yeah.
Well, some very preliminary results. We can see that, like, when the dry season starts in the Amazon, is about like July and August. You can see lots of trees, they start flushing their leaves. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because it's kind of like counterintuitive to think that trees, they actually flushing their leaves when the dry season starts, right? This is something that is have been quite debated over the past 10 years, 15 years. And but it's very obvious. Like, we can see these when we're there in the field, and also from our data. And this is because actually this is like an evolutionary strategies, like an evolutionary strategy that, like, these trees, they use to flush leaves that are more efficient to make photosynthesis, to do photosynthesis. So because they've got more pigments and everything. So probably they are investing more in growth, and they are very smart. So that's what they do.
Thank you. And do you have any top tips for current students looking to move into a postdoc or carry on in research?
Oh, great question. Yes, find some people who you like to work with, and a group that is asking very interesting questions. I think probably this is the number one tip I would give, finding a group that has been like groundbreaking in terms of asking very good questions.
Okay. Thank you, Matheus. Up next, we have Dr. Karen Wong, Senior Researcher with the International Institute for Environment and Development, IIED, working within the climate change group. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Cicely. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces, very dear faces, and to reconnect in this opportunity. So I was a student at the geography department. I was very fortunate to be supervised by Professor Bhaskar. I also did the Master in Conservation Leadership with Chris Sandbrook. Did my placement with UNEP WCMC. My PhD was about the interlinkages between metrics and notions of environment, poverty, and well-being. And And currently, I am a senior researcher at the International Institute for Environmental Development, IIED, and I will share my screen now. My work is related to justice dimensions in the climate and environment agendas. For those who don't know, IIED is an action research organization, and the mission is to build a fairer, more sustainable world using evidence, action, and influence, and working always in partnership with others, especially with organizations that are underrepresented and who represent who are based in the global south. We work in 4 research groups in climate change, natural resources, human settlements, and the shaping sustainable markets. I work part of my time in the climate change group and part of my time in the natural resources group. Almost all my work has to do with a justice dimension in both the climate and environmental agenda, and most of my work is around 4 work streams or 4 processes. One is the research co-production with grassroots partners. The second is the rolling out of a site-level assessment of governance and equity in Latin America, and I will speak a little bit about that. Social learning is the 3rd work stream that I am engaged with, that has to do with the recognition and participation dimension of justice. And the 4th is fundraising, but I don't want, I want to go into a little of detail with that. I won't have the time to go into detail with all of these, but wanted to share some of the links in case you are interested in learning more about the specific projects. I am currently coordinating a project in collaboration with 3 grassroots organizations, the Prime Alliance in Kenya, Women Climate Centers International with geographical presence in Kenya and Uganda, and SDI with geographical presence in 30 countries is the Slum Dwellers International Network that basically work with people living in informal settlements. So this project is about engaging citizens for socially just climate action, and the research aims to document self-organizing and community-led adaptation responses and citizen engagement to strengthen locally led and socially just climate action, and has a component of digital tools and how technology can be used to respond to local needs. The second work stream that I'm working on is the support to the rolling out of the SAGE tool. The SAGE site-level assessment of governance and equity is a tool that was designed in collaboration with 18 organizations. Last week is a collaborative initiative led by IIED, with IIED, the University of East Anglia, and other conservation organizations. It is a rapid assessment that is based in 10 equity and governance principles that are grouped in 3 justice dimensions: recognition, participation, and distribution, with some management principles. It's based on IUCN good governance guidelines, and I am coordinating the rolling out in Latin America, in Bolivia, in Tacana 2, which is a self-governed indigenous territory, Honduras, and Colombia. This is the picture of the assessment, I think it was 2 weeks ago, in the Tacana. And the picture on the right is, yeah?
Sorry to interrupt, we can only see one screen.
Oh.
We can only see the very first picture.
Thanks for letting me know, I don't know why.
Very nice there.
Sorry.
Is this okay? Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it now.
But we saw that before, and then when you went to, now we can see it.
So
yeah.
did you see the research co-production and the link?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, and this one. Can you see this one?
Yes.
Can now, yes,
Takana.
thank you. It's much
Okay.
better.
So the picture on the left is the implementation of the pilot of the governance and equity assessment tool in Takana. The picture on the right is the implementation of the tool in Zambia. Last year, we finalized 8 pilots in 8 countries, Cambodia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Chad, Tanzania, Zambia, Greece, and the UK. And the plan is to bring all these lessons to the World Conservation Congress next year, because it's been suggested to be part of the green list, IUCN green list. The third work stream that I am engaged is, I think that's more the most advocacy oriented or more interactive aspect of my job. And it's around social learning and amplifying voice. I work with a group of 6 grassroots networks that represent traditionally overlooked and marginalized groups, including people living in informal settlements, people living in informal employment who are working with the way speakers, unions, indigenous peoples, pastoralist communities, and grassroots women. And these organizations are organized as social movements and grassroots networks, and together they work with 14 million people in more than 45 countries. What we have been working with them is we are opening spaces in climate relevant decision-making spaces such as COP and Climate Summit, the Resilient Future Day, and we have a team, the negotiations team, that have a capacity building program to enhance the climate literacy on negotiations, and especially in climate negotiations. We also organize events in the run-up to COP and CBD. The next one is the Thriving and Just Society that we are planning to be held on the 17th of November. And I would like to make this announcement now and to invite you all very cordially to join us. We are aiming to have a high-profile event to ask for increased ambition for an integrated action on climate and nature in the run-up to both COP26 and COP15 of the CBD. And I think that's it for me. Yeah, a big chunk of my time is around fundraising. So my suggestion or my advice is to cultivate some of the soft skills or invest some time in training for fundraising because it's needed. I found it a crucial aspect in all my career. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Lynn, would you like to ask your question to Karen?
Yeah, hi Karen, thanks for that. It sounds like lots of interesting things. I had a specific question about the SAGE tool, which I might have understood right from the very small amount of information. It looks like an assessment process that's about a site level assessment, and it looks like it's engaging the people who are living and working on the site. So I wondered whether when you do that, you find the results kind of accord with what you expected at the start, or whether you find unexpected things are revealed by the process.
Well, the characteristic of this assessment is that it's a self-assessment. So it reveals perceptions of people around principles of governance and equity. And yes, it highlights some differences, and the methodology involves different steps. So the first step ensures that people are comfortable in speaking about their interests and assessing through dialogue. So it's a deliberative process, a deliberation-based process where people can discuss openly and give an score to different principles against different principles of equity and governance. given that it's organized by the local organizations, all the process starts with stakeholder analysis, where the partners identify who are the main stakeholders or actors, because we are grouping the name actors through the right holders and the power holders or the duty bearers. And both groups or both relevant groups engage in conversations about how to improve equity and governance against this set of criteria. I'm not sure that I answered the question, but
no, but you told us a lot. You told us a lot of information, so it was really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Our last speaker in this session will be Dr. Ellie Tew of Forestry England, where she manages the Natural Capital and Resilience Programme. Over to you, Ellie.
Thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen. Has that worked?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Thanks ever so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So my PhD was focusing on ecosystem service delivery and how we can maximise ecosystem services within modern forest landscapes in this country. And in particular, I was focusing on Thetford Forest, which is a big old forest landscape about an hour from Cambridge in Norfolk and Suffolk. And my PhD was a case studentship, which meant that it was a collaboration with a non-academic partner, and I was working with Forestry England. And that meant that my PhD was really very applied, and we were focusing on generating practical management recommendations for the management of Thetford Forest into the future. Straight after my PhD, I won some funding for a few months to do an industrial placement fellowship, which was brilliant because it was all about how we can apply our research results to non-academic applied settings. So I took this opportunity to design this prototype decision support system for my colleagues in Forestry England, which hosted all my research results. So as I mentioned, my research was quite practically and applied, but I also realised that expecting all my colleagues to read my thesis was maybe pushing things a bit too far. So I wanted to be able to hand something over to them that allowed them to not only just view my results in a user-friendly way, but also interrogate them and apply them in site-specific situations. So I incorporated various things into this app, which was built in R Shiny, that allows our foresters and our planners to make site-by-site decisions based on specific information, different ecosystem services, different weightings, and incorporating all the research that I had done, which was very exciting and is now a prototype tool that we're using in the organisation. After that, I actually had a holiday, and that would be my first piece of advice to anyone finishing off a PhD. Take a bit of a break if you possibly can. I know it's a bit difficult at the moment, but really important to give your brain a bit of a rest because it's inevitably a stressful thing at the end of PhDs. But then I started a role in Forestry England, so I moved out of academia into the public sector, and I became the Forest Resilience Programme Manager in the East District of Forestry England. And again, this was focusing on Thetford Forest, and my role has really been to try and coordinate our long-term management response to all the challenges and opportunities that we face today. So we have lots of issues and challenges. We've got climate change, of course, the increasing prevalence of tree pests and diseases that I'm sure you're very familiar with that we're facing in this country, very high deer populations, which are all together mean that we're our forests and our woodlands in this country are dramatically changing what we can do successfully, not just in terms of what silviculture we can do, but also the woodland ecology and functioning and biodiversity. And at the same time, we're a public sector organisation. We manage a public forest estate for public goods and public benefits. We have lots of objectives under that, including not just sustainable timber management, but biodiversity conservation. So Thetford Forest is, I think, the second largest site of special scientific interest in the country. It's also an SPA for nightjar and woodlark. It's a huge visitor hub in the East Anglian region, and we're getting increasing number of visitors with projections for that to increase dramatically over the coming years. We have commitments to heritage and archaeology. So we're trying to do all sorts of brilliant things, but as I'm sure you can imagine, trying to work out how to bring all of this together at the same time of very challenging environmental changes over long timescales is really tricky. So my job has been to try and bring together the science on that, bring together the evidence, and coordinate how we're going to plan for the long-term future of this forest to make sure it's resilient, but also delivers everything that we want from the landscape. So a really great role at the interface of science and policy and practice. And just very recently, in the last few weeks, I've started a new role as the National Natural Capital and Resilience Programme Manager for Forestry England, which is a new role. It's really exciting. Forestry England is the largest landowning organisation in the country. We're responsible for 250,000 hectares of not just woodlands, but also all sorts of other habitats like open heathland. And we've been quite industry leading in natural capital. We're not very good at talking about it, but we have been using it as a principle for a number of years now, published natural capital accounts for 5 years now, but we're really stepping up how we think about natural capital so that we're not just reporting on it and using it to show what we do, but integrating it much more in our day-to-day decision making on the ground in all our different forests. So that we're making sure that we're maximising our natural capital benefit and the public goods from our estate, and similarly with forest resilience. So really exciting. I'm really much looking forward to leading this work going forwards. And just to finish off, because we were asked to sort of reflect slightly on what advice we might give to other early career researchers. And I suppose I always felt like a bit of an outlier among my colleagues in stepping outside of academia and the traditional environmental NGOs going into the public sector. And I really recommend it as somewhere to investigate and look at. There are big organisations, landowning organisations who are doing really exciting things at the moment. Places like the National Trust or Forestry England or Environment Agency, and there's great opportunities for scientists to go out and make a difference in ways that you might not have necessarily thought of. So that would be my advice. Think outside the box a little bit and see what opportunities are out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor, and yeah, congratulations on your new role. All sounds
thank you.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting. I think it's going really well. Do you find you use your PhD research skills in your new role? Do you?
Definitely, yeah. Absolutely. I think I found in the last year I've been doing this forest resilience programme, which has been about balancing loads of different things and working out how to get your head around lots of conflicting demands and a great big project, and that's been very similar to doing a PhD and sort of working out how to bring things together in a coherent way and get enough evidence and get enough science to it all, but also ultimately move things forward and you know, in a pragmatic way and over a relatively short time frame as well. So yeah, that's come in useful.
Thank you. Michael Overton, would you like to ask your question directly? Ellie?
Yes, I can, thanks. My question is, has Forestry England begun to make valuations for naturally regenerating scrublands? I suppose I'm really pointing at rewilding here and how that might be built into your role.
Yeah, really good question. And we've actually been having discussions over the last couple of days about what big landscape scale projects we might do next, looking at things like rewilding and landscape scale networks and things. It's a tricky one, as I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with. How do you value things like biodiversity benefit? And there's no straightforward answer to that, and indeed it shouldn't necessarily be done. But we are certainly looking at how we incorporate all different types of our management and moving away from just the simple things to value like carbon and timber and natural regeneration, and of whether that is scrub or of forest or of ecological succession of landscapes is definitely something that we're looking into very carefully and working out how we capture that because that's the stuff that often gets missed, doesn't get incorporated in our traditional accounts, and that's the stuff that often has the greatest benefit, whether that's for biodiversity or any other type of ecosystem service. So yeah, something we're looking into closely.
Thank you. Thanks, Eleanor. And
thank you.
All our 4 speakers. It's been great to hear what you've been getting up to. I'm going to hand back to David Coombs now. Thanks.
I think we need another 2-minute break. We're running behind schedule, but I think at the end of each of these blocks, we just need to stand up and stretch very slightly. So have another couple of minutes break, and we'll be back.